Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I'm so excited about my guest today. I have Mendy Landreth. Hey, girl, how are you? Welcome.
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm so excited to have you. Let me tell everyone a little bit about you, and then I'll hand it over to you for a proper intro, and then we'll jump into our topic. So, you and I met probably about a year ago almost. So, we are a part of a group together, a group for all of us are group practice owners. And so, we get together once a month and we talk about all the ways to nurture our group practice. And I've loved getting to know you. You are so much fun, just your personality and the things you do are so amazing. So I'm excited to share with everyone a little bit about that. So you're a licensed professional counselor. You're also a supervisor. You are a certified child. Okay, I'm going to get this wrong. I want to say it
It's
right.
okay.
Child parent relationship therapy
Uh-huh.
pro-
Yes.
provider. Yeah. So we're going to talk actually specifically about that in a little bit. But also, I love that you work a lot with children and adults. You own a practice, a group practice in South Lake, Texas, and you and I have overlap in a lot of what we do, but also because you work specifically with children, you have so much fun stuff to offer today. We're going to have such a great conversation. So tell us a little bit about your practice, what you do, your kind of just a little bit about your counseling world.
Okay. I'm so excited to be here. And Navarre, you're such a powerhouse. So it's fun to be doing this with you. Okay. So, yes, I own Restoring Hope Counseling and Consulting in South Lake. And it's a great group of solid clinicians here. And we see all ages. Actually, as young as age 2, providing play therapy. All of us are trained at the Center for Play Therapy, which is world renowned for play therapy in the University of North Texas. But we all see all ages. We see adults and adolescents as well. But I would say, my personal passion is working with parents. I love working with adults and teens and children and play therapy, but where my biggest passion is working with parents because I am a parent and parenting is very challenging and it just squeezes just sometimes the worst out of you. And so I love providing practical tools to parents, giving them some things to try at home and some evidence-based, research-based, tools. And so yeah, that's what I love to do. And we, all of the providers here are Christians as well. So sometimes we have families who are looking for specifically for Christians, because we do a lot of partnership with churches and things like that. So that is something unique about us. Yeah, we're in a beautiful location in South Lake, and
Yes.
yeah, so
I
that's a
love
little
your
bit.
office. Been to your office, beautiful views. You got a pond, right? Right
We are
outside your
very thankful. I'm
office.
staring at it right now.
I love it. I love it.
We
And
pay a lot for rent, but
yeah,
it,
that's
it's
true.
it's a beautiful place.
And you have two girls, so you have a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old. You are in this like you're about to send
Yes,
your first off to
yes. First
college.
launch next month. Yes, she is so excited, and I'm excited too because people are like, "How are you doing?" And yes, at moments when it gets still and quiet, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy. My little baby's all grown up." But she is going to be studying music education, and that's just her passion. So it's just really cool that she gets to go to the school of her choice. She got into the music ed program, and so she's just really excited. And so I'm excited for her. I think she's just going to really thrive there. So
I love it. Where's she going?
she's going to Baylor.
Oh,
Yes.
good. Awesome.
Husband and all of his family and all of our nieces and nephew, they all went there. So she was looking at going out of state, but then found out that they have a really good music ed program. So she's
That's
staying in
great.
state. So
I love it. And before you and I hit the record button, we were talking about, well, we talked about a lot of things. It took us, we were supposed to record like 40
we're having
minutes
a good
before
time
we
chatting.
started. Yeah, it was great. But we were talking about the different things that we really in our lives try to be our favorite word, intentional about, right? And so
Intention.
we talked about how, and these are things that you and I are going to try to touch on, and we may end up actually doing a second episode because we talked about the way we try to be in marriage. You were talking about your marriage to your husband, Craig, and how intentional you try to be and being mindful now that you are kind of entering the empty nest stage of life, that it's even more important to be intentional, and then talking about being intentional in parenting. And so Before we go down that, we have to talk about the fun story of your father-in-law and what you do and how you do it and how your husband being the son of that man and being married to you. Okay, so I went to UNT also, University of North Texas, did not do any of the play therapy classes. I cannot believe
Girl,
I
what were
did.
you
And I know
thinking?
I didn't
It's like a
know. I
mecca.
think I
Play
missed
therapy.
the memo about how amazing play therapy was. And I definitely missed the memo about who your father-in-law was. Yeah,
Yeah.
didn't
Well,
know.
I didn't
So
even realize what a big deal he was until I was in his classes. Actually, took as while I was his daughter-in-law, took classes and tried to just hide the last name until people kind of figured it out. But I didn't realize what a big deal he was and what a big deal, UNT was, because I just went there for my undergrad and then I just decided to get my counseling, degree. And then until I realized, people are coming from New York, from Asia, from Europe, just all over the world to study under him. And so I feel very blessed that I got to study under him
yeah.
as well. And it
Okay,
is a
tell
really
us about him and what he does and why it's relevant to what we're going to be talking about
okay.
today.
Yeah, so Dr. Gary Landreth, most people don't know him unless you are in the field of play therapy, in the field of counseling. And so he's just a really big, known as a big guru in the field just because of the way that he's pioneered. And he was a professor for many years at UNT and spoke, has been a world renowned speaker on the field of play therapy. So I definitely have looked up to him and still to this day, call him when I feel stuck and asking him questions about, clients or whatnot. But yeah, he's just amazing of just really just helping people see life through the eyes of a child and yeah, just be able to see a child's perspective. And so that's one thing that I enjoy doing with parents, helping them look at things like how do helping them see how their child might be perceiving things, whether it's, something the child might be watching or the tone of voice of the parent or whatnot. And so that's
Yeah.
just kind of a new perspective and for a lot of
Hmm.
people.
Yeah. Okay. So let's roll right into give us a little bit of an explanation on what play therapy is, because I think a lot of parents, especially I'm sure someone hearing you say that you work with kids as young as 2 is probably like, how the heck do you do therapy with a 2-year-old, right? So walk us through real quick what play therapy is and what it looks like.
Yeah, and I have to say there have been 2-year-olds that we've had, and then we're like, oh, never mind, let's just work with the parents. It really depends on the child and what they're needing and how they've developed along and where they are in their stages and whatnot. But yes, we do work with those little sometimes, and it is really fun and delightful. But yeah, so play therapy, basically, a child isn't going to come and sit on the sofa or in a chair and just say, I'm feeling very anxious because my parents are arguing a lot or because what there are so many demands at my school, or whatever.
Right.
They just don't typically, and even if they do communicate that way and they're very articulate, their natural form of communication is play. And so we try to meet them where they're at versus requiring them to be like an adult and sitting still and communicating through their prefrontal cortex and whatnot. So we are meeting them where they're at. And we actually, what we use here is called child-centered play therapy. And it's the most researched form of play therapy. There are lots of different types of play therapy, but we use the only evidence-based form of play therapy, again, is child-centered play therapy. And it's basically where we're allowing them, while they're here for 45 minutes, to be in charge of their time, how they're spending their time. We're giving them an opportunity to be a leader and decide, what do they want to talk about, what do they not want to talk about, what do they want to play with or not play with. If they choose to not talk and not play, we can still work with them. It's amazing how, we've had selectively mute children, and they can get a lot out of it even if they're not realizing it at the time. And we see a lot of transformation, at home or at school, even if they choose to be silent during the time here. So we're just meeting them where they're at with carefully selected toys that are very, therapeutic in nature. And so we allow them to choose the toys that they want to play with, and then they are able to work out, what's going on inside of them and convey messages that they need to convey.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
it's
really
so fun. I remember when we toured your office, I loved seeing how excited you got when you would show the playrooms themselves, because it the meticulous, like intentional decisions that you have put into forming your playrooms. And I think even some of the other therapists in our group, when we've toured their office, like you get so excited when you see how other play therapists set up their playrooms, because it really does matter. And this is
Yeah.
not something I understand very much at all, but the way you set up a playroom, the way the
Yeah.
toys are presented to the child, what the toys are, how they're placed,
Yes.
all of that matters.
Yeah. And you're talking about one thing probably that I've mentioned before of how, you don't just have a big pile of, like you would in a playroom at a house, a big pile of toys that they have to dig through. And because basically if play is their language, then toys are like their words. And so if they're having to dig each session for like their specific words that they're trying to use, and that's frustrating. That's kind of like you and I, if I'm sitting here trying to remember, okay, what is that word? Oh, intentional, that's the word. It's easier when it's just right there, easy to grab. So, and then also, yeah, we try to make it predictable, because that helps the child feel safe and comfortable and secure. And so we try to have things in the same place, or at least in the same general vicinity, each week, so that they can come back and it's stable.
Yeah.
And we try to be as predictable and stable in our nature and our responses as well.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love the most about the work that you specifically do is that you are very intentional about the work you do with the parents. Now, I know other play therapists, or I have clients who've taken their children to play therapists where they say that the parents never really get a chance to talk to the therapist and they don't have any idea what the kid is working on. And that's hard
Yeah.
for me. And because I just don't understand a lot of, I guess I just don't see as much how progress can be made with a child if the parent's not part of the equation. And so you are very, very dedicated to the work that you do with parents. So tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that child-parent relationship therapy.
Yeah, well, and before I even share a little bit about that,
Yeah,
just going about the parent consultations, that is a
yeah,
really big deal to me, to involve the parents. We see the parents as part of the solution. I mean, it's like, yes, we can help the child, but we can help more if we can also support the parents. And we don't come in, saying, okay, you're doing it all wrong, you need to do this. We come in with empathy, because being parents, being a parent myself, it's like, I know it's frustrating. It's it's just, you have to be your own cheerleader. You're not going to get it from your children. And so giving them the support that they need and the empathy, and then also giving them some tools, is just part of the whole process. And being on the other end of taking my own kids to therapy, and at times, uh, I can think of one time where it's like, they would just do a little 5-minute check-in in the lobby, and I'm like, wait, no, this you need to bond a little bit with me so I can trust you with my child,
mhm,
and because really, I want the child to bond with their parent even more than they're bonding with me. They're going to be with their parent the rest of their life, right?
yeah,
Even as an adult child. So child parent relationship therapy, CPRT, is also an evidence-based form of therapy, and it's also called filial therapy. It's a form of filial therapy. It's a manualized form. And so my father-in-law, Dr. Gary Landreth, is one of the developers of that. And so it's basically where we're training parents to have these special play times once a week for 30 minutes. They have these special play times with their kids, using the skills of a professional play therapist. So I'm a registered play therapist, and so I'm training these parents in some of these same skills that they can use at home once a week. So what happens is, it's typically it's developed, it's designed to be in the context of a group setting. So we just meet with the parents in a group setting, typically 2 hours once a week for 10 weeks. And we train them in some of the basic skills of counseling and play therapy. And then they go and they create their own toy kit using this list of toys that we provide. And then once a week for 30 minutes, they have a special playtime with their child, and they actually video themselves. And then they bring video clips back to the group. And so then we can give them some guidance about, okay, okay, it looks like you are really like showing them interest, you know, with your body language. Okay. And here's, you know, remember to say this and try this. And so we give them some guidance, and then they're able to continue to connect with their child on a whole nother different level than before. So it's really powerful. Really,
Wow, that is amazing. I didn't actually know the details of that until now. So what age is this really good for?
I would say typically like 3 to 10, sometimes two, sometimes 11, 12, depends on the child. But even, you know, even those skills that we teach, you know, the parents with younger children, they can use it with their older children or as their children age. You know, like for me, what it looked like with my teens is like, you know, with one child, like we every Thursday we would go to In-N-Out Burger, you know, and while we're going through the line, well, we would go wherever she wanted to go, and it happened to be that, you know, for a season. And so it was predictable because it was every Thursday. And during that time, I'm not asking her questions. I'm just letting her talk about what she wants to talk about or be silent if she wants to be silent. I'm just, you know, responding to what she's doing or saying, and just not trying to solve her problems, but just being there with her, just connecting. So it can be, in other words, it can be adapted to the teens as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that yeah, I love the emphasis on consistency, predictability, you know, just really making it a commitment where you're carving out this time for your child. Your child knows what to expect. And I think, you know, especially right now, like you know, you have a 15-year-old, I have an 11-year-old, and they're in this season of very like we're entering this season of he's totally fine playing video games with his friends online and forgetting that we exist.
Right.
And we're having to remind him that we exist by setting limits on the time he
Mhm.
can play, but also pulling him out. Like it's like
Remember us?
unplugging. Yeah, unplugging. And as soon as we do create that environment where we unplug and we bring him back into our world, he completely shifts his focus
Yeah.
and loves it, you know, and
Mhm.
yes, there could be some initial resistance and frustration about, well, I would rather do this thing. But when
Mhm.
we create this um, kind of understanding and consistency of like, but this is important too. And when we do this together, it does feed a different part of our hearts and our minds and our relationship.
Mhm.
And it's so powerful, but we have to be intentional. And one
Yes.
thing you told me before we recorded, and I love this, you said one of the most amazing compliments that you've ever received was when someone told you you are one of the, and I don't want to butcher how they said it, but you are so intentional in your parenting, and that
Mhm.
lit your heart, right? And so why does that matter? Why does it matter to be intentional? Tell
Yeah.
me.
Well, and I want to touch on what we had talked about beforehand too. That case, so that your listeners can understand that was out of the context of having so much mom guilt and knowing,
Yes.
like, you know, how, you know, just parenting can just bring out the worst of you. You know, I never knew that I would, you know, yell at my kids and be so mean at times. And so, you know, being hard on myself in that way. But then just this neighbor friend saying, you know, Mindy, you are so intentional as a parent. I'm like, I can't argue with that. That's true. I really do try hard and do try to learn new skills and grow and develop, and apologize at times, you know, when I get it wrong. I don't apologize every time, but I am, you know, getting it better at that and trying to model that for my kids, you know. And anyway, so
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought. Let's see. You
No, you're
asked
good. Talking about intent. No, you actually perfect.
intentionality.
Yeah.
Yes. It's just why it's so important because, you know, you talking about video games, right? You know, if we just let them do their thing, then they are going to go to the path of least resistance and just do whatever's easy. And sometimes, you know, if we don't carve out this time, then they're just going to do whatever, you know, is right in front of them. And we, you know, end up doing the same thing. We're so hooked on our phones, and it's so hard, you know, in this special 30-minute playtime that we, you know, have parents do. We say, you know, your phone does not need to be there. If you have to have it there because you have a child somewhere else and you have, you know, you have childcare, and then of course, then just put it on silent. Don't answer it if it's anybody, unless it's an emergency. And that's so hard for us, right? We're so used to just hurry, 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 hustle, hustle, get things done, long to-do list, being busy. So this is really therapeutic for us as well, just to slow down and just to be with the person in front of us, to just be focusing on them. And yeah, so that intentionality is so important.
Yeah, and it applies to any important relationship in our life, right? So looking at your marriage or your significant other and your child, like those are equally important. They look different. Maybe sometimes we're prioritizing certain things more than the others, just depending on season of life and whatever. But ultimately, it's so easy to get pulled in a direction that's not very
Yes.
important or not rewarding. Like I think, I've had conversations with people on here before, awesome guests, where we talk about work burnout, where you're
Yes.
so consumed by the things that are happening at work, then that what you're bringing home at the end of the day is kind of the leftovers. And that
Yeah.
is hard. And it's not always easy to prioritize and it's not always easy to notice. But part of why I love having these episodes with different professionals and different guests of just who can just tell their life story and their professional story is it's something for us to reflect on, and could we be doing it a little bit differently?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do today that would help? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of that we have to know, we have to be okay with saying no to things so that we can say yes to the things that are really valuable to us and really important to us. And so there are a lot of good things, but what is really important to us in our family. So learning to say no to things so that we can say yes to the things that really matter.
Yeah. One thing that I would love to get your thoughts on as a therapist, I think people sometimes assume that we never get things wrong when we're parenting or in our marriage.
Not this
So
one.
not true. Yeah, absolutely not true for me. And so one of the things that is always important to highlight is that we never stop learning, right? We can choose not to learn, but if we're really being, I guess trying to be the best that we can at life in general, then we're always practicing new skills or trying to just be better at something, and that includes our relationships. And so,
Mhm.
you being an expert in working with children, with parenting, how do you find that you try to stay grounded in, because like for me, I'll be working on something with a client, and then as I'm doing that naturally, I'm like, ooh. I should apply
Mhm.
that to myself.
Yeah.
Like that's something I used to do with my son that I haven't been doing as much recently. I would like to get back to that. So, does that happen to you?
Oh, definitely. And actually, I kind of like looking back because I stayed home exclusively with my children for a time period. And part of me wishes I would have stayed in practice because there's accountability as you're
Yes.
talking with parents and you're like, remember, blah, 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 then it's like, oh, okay, I can't just be talking the talk. I got to walk the walk, And so
Yep.
there is that accountability, when you're working with families of, okay, I've got to do this as well. If I'm asking, like we were talking about a minute ago, if I'm encouraging parents, like, hey, did you go back to your child? You did something that really like severed the relationship. Did you go back and repair the relationship by humbling yourself and apologizing and whatnot? Or are you staring at your phone all the time? Or you whatever it is. Are you working too hard? Or so it. Your dog's so sweet.
Sorry. He's just in my face.
He just wants to be a part.
He's
He says, "How come
needy.
you never invited
I
me on to
know.
guest?" But yes, just there is that level of accountability when you are, helping other people, and just yes, we are all infallible. We all have our issues, and and one of the rules of thumb that my father-in-law talks about is it's not as important what you do, but what you do after what you've already done. So, like when you mess up, it's like coming back around and like, hey, I messed up. And we have to model that for our kids because so many of our kids think that they have to be perfect. And sometimes we put that pressure on them, or society does, or their school system, or whatnot. And
Yeah.
so, helping them be okay with that imperfection.
Yeah. Side note, so you and I were talking before we recorded about your husband, Craig, and that saying I want him on here as a guest because as the spouse, first of all, spouse of a therapist is always a fun creature to talk to, but also
I
he's
feel sorry
the,
for him. I think us as therapists,
I
we're a whole
know.
nother.
And speaking of intentionality, like we have to be careful not to quote therapize our spouses and our children. And especially for Craig because his father is also this like guru in the therapy world. So you and I were talking about how he's so good at implementing certain skills, but you're still always having to teach, like we have to teach them what do we need, what do we want. So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about how that looks.
Yeah. So I mean, he like most people would say, oh, he's a natural, and he really is. Like he's one of those that he's just will be. focused on you, even if there's so many distractions. He makes you feel like you're the only person in the room, and even if he barely knows you. And so he has these natural things, that because of growing up with his mom and his dad, being so intentional as parents and loving and whatnot. So he has that natural. But yes, I was telling you about how just even though we've been married over 25 years, there's still room for growth for both of us. And you have to teach your spouse what you need, like, hey, I need you to reflect my feelings. And then he'll be like, I reflected them twice in a conversation. I'm like, I need more. Like, I need you to keep doing it. I need you to not ask questions, not try to solve the problem, and just listen, and that'll bring it out of me. And because whenever you ask a question like, well, I don't understand. Well, why do you blah blah blah? That just shuts me down.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and
I
thankfully
love
he's
that.
one of those who wants to learn, and it, and so yes, like we went on a hike this last yesterday morning when we were out of town, and at the end of the hike, I'm like, thank you so much for spending the whole time just listening to me and helping me work through things, and even waiting. He had a rough start to the week, and he waited like a few days to even give me solutions. I was
Good
like, thank you
man.
so much for
Yeah.
waiting and
Which
just
that
helping
must have
me.
been hard for him, right? Because he may have that natural desire to help and
He
solve
wants to
and yeah, and make you feel better. He sees that you're not great right now and he wants you to feel better, but he knew
know.
that that's not what you needed and definitely not at that time. But ultimately, it's cool because both persons needs have to be met in a situation like that. And so if he's looking at you and he's like, okay, I know that this isn't the time for me to give that to her, then he is using, his discretion and knowledge of you to say, okay, I'm going to wait. That's
Right.
not what she needs. Let me give her what she needs. But then there's also this need for him to really come to you and give what he feels is important, and you don't reject that. It's just
Right.
about timing, right? And so recognizing that even sometimes what we need is can be met, but even when we're needy or have our needs, they are a time of struggle. We also have to remember that it can't always be about us and what we need, but that person also needs to help us in a way that or try to help us in a way that checks some boxes for them. And so
Yeah.
I love that you are, that it's okay to also let him give you kind of what he needs to give you.
Yeah. You got to kind of take turns, right? And who's the
Mhm.
most needy at the moment, right? And
Yeah.
weighing it out, and and just learning to meet the other person's needs and set your own desires aside. It's
Hmm.
so critical, right?
Yep.
And you have to learn, what does the other person, what are their needs? What really, is important to them. And like we were talking about before we recorded, just sometimes a happy wife is a happy life. So it's like, if the wife is just enjoying her, life and career and whatnot, then that's a natural blessing to her husband.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So, one of the things that you and I were talking about before we recorded that we want to make time for, and I'm trying to decide. So, tell me if we should jump into it now or come back to it in another episode. But we're talking about just generally reflective listening skills, right? And so, there's the aspect of it with our children and really implementing it there, and then it applies to our adult relationships too. So maybe we can explain what it is, start talking about it relative to children, and then maybe
Okay.
we can do another episode on like how we use that in our marriages. But tell us, does that sound like a good plan?
Oh, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. If you want to role play, I love doing role
Ooh,
playing.
that's fun. Oh, okay. So maybe we'll do like intro explanation a little bit now, and then we
Yeah,
can role play next time too.
sounds
So, okay, reflective listening skills. Explain to us, ma'am, what is that?
good. Okay, so basically, it's about reflecting what you're hearing. So if you it's like having, as if, okay, if you're telling me something that's heavy on your heart, and I'm trying to really connect with you and really help you feel heard, then it's like me putting a big mirror in front of your face to help you see yourself, to help you see what's going on. It's not me inserting my own thoughts about what you're feeling, or my own judgments, or my own bright ideas or solutions. It's just helping you process through what's going on. Okay, so it's it's like, how do people feel love? How do they feel heard? It's, it's the direct eye contact. It's the leaning forward. It's the, the fillers. It's paraphrasing. Okay, this is what I'm hearing you say. And it's also finding, specifically reflecting feelings is, okay, it sounds like you really are frustrated versus, are you frustrated? Okay, one
Mm-hmm.
is more powerful than the other, right? Or like if you're on a phone with a friend that, oh, that sounds really frustrating. That, that's pretty easy. Like we do that naturally, but that's not as powerful as, oh man, you are really frustrated. That's accepting. It's like, hey, I can handle that you're frustrated. I don't have to take that personally. And that's another thing specifically for parents, well, and spouses, with each other. But when you reflect the other person's feelings, it keeps you from taking ownership and responsibility of that person's feelings. It helps you return the responsibility back to them. So, like, let's say the child is frustrated about not going to the park, and they're like, you won't take me to the park. And then if you're like, oh man, you're so frustrated. You really want to go to the park. Yes, you're so mean. You won't take me. Man, you just really want to go and you just wish we could go every day. Yeah, you never take us to the park. Even knowing that you just took them the day before. It's
Yeah.
like, oh man, you are so mad. You just wish you could go to the park every day. And then they start crying. You're like, oh, you were just really sad. You really love going to the park and you were really disappointed. You're disappointed it's raining. You were hoping to go. And then there's this moment of connection, right?
Mm.
Versus, you're the bad guy and they're blaming it all on you. There,
Yeah.
it's the focus, because if you're like, well, but we can go later on today, or we can go tomorrow, or you're trying to solve the problem, then you're not connecting with them, on a heart-to-heart level.
Yeah. Okay. So I love it. Love the impersonations also.
Oh,
Those are so fun.
that's one of
It's
my
great.
favorite parts
It's
of therapy
beautiful.
is a role play. You can ask your clients.
I love
I
it.
get
So
dramatic.
where do you insert so because in the reflection, there are some people that are, and you and I were talking about this off camera, is they're like, I did it. I tried it, it didn't work. And so, but what you
Yes.
teach and what you really try to help parents understand is that you keep going, you keep going. And so walk us through why we keep going. And then
Yeah.
where also do we insert like, I'm sorry you're frustrated, or do we just reflect the
Yeah.
feeling?
So the whole I'm sorry means that you have something to apologize for. So that means that you're responsible for their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And as a therapist, we are trying to help clients with healthy individuation and get away from enmeshment and codependency and all that, right? So when we say, oh, I'm so sorry that you feel that way, well, that makes it sound like you're responsible for their feelings and you're not. So versus just, oh man, you're really bummed about that, or you're really sad, or you're disappointed. It just, it doesn't complicate the matter with your own emotions. When we get our own emotions mixed in with theirs, then it's extra difficult for them to see and process through what's going on inside of them.
Yeah, especially when we bring in parent, mommy guilt or parent guilt, because we feel like we want that to stop. And like you said,
Yes.
sometimes we try to fix it and there
Yeah.
is a time and a place for a distraction. And sometimes we just have to, and you might go to distraction
Yeah.
afterwards, but first really taking the time to
Yes.
acknowledge this child's feelings, because it's part of respect, right? Is
Yeah.
respecting that the child's allowed to have these feelings. And I know people listening to this, like I can already in my head, I know there are gonna be people that are like, that's so ridiculous. Why are we doing this? Why are we spending so much time validating this fit? Like, okay, we can't go, suck it up,
Naturally.
move on, right? So
Yeah.
how do you how do
Exactly.
you explain
Yeah.
why we validate and why we keep validating?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love working with people. Like a lot of times it's a dad that's like, they just need to toughen up, and the thing is that if you were to respond, hey kid, you just need to toughen up, it's not that big of a deal. They're not going to come to you anymore when they have issues. You want to develop a space with them so that when they are a teenager and they feel rejected by a girlfriend, boyfriend, or whatever, not, wanting, you know, turning them down, or whatever, whatever it is, or they're in college, you want them to come back to you and you want to develop this connection. But if you're always judging their feelings and their perspective and why they're feeling that way, then you're not going to have that open door. And really what happens is when you reflect negative feelings like anger, frustration, sadness, it actually tends to decrease those feelings. And parents think, well, if I reflect it, doesn't that make them think that I agree with it? No, not necessarily. Feelings are what they are. It's like whether you accept them or not, they're there. Behaviors, those need to be dealt with, right? But feelings, they're just there, right? So yeah, so teaching parents how to accept the child where they're at, because if you just try to pull the child and say, stop being so mad about that, then they're just going to prove to you more why they're mad and why they're not going to stop being mad, right? But if you're like, oh man, you're so mad about that, you wish that blah blah blah, then they're going to be like, yes, you get it, yes, I am mad, and blah blah blah, and then they're able to get it off their chest, and then usually it de-escalates. It's actually a de-escalation tool, unless you use it only for, like, if your goal is just to try to get them to be happier or to come down and be calmer, then it may not be as effective, or if you're
Yeah.
doing it mechanically.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No, go ahead.
but if your goal is connection, then they're going to sense that, they're going to feel that, and then it's going to decrease. And then when we reflect someone's positive emotions like happiness, excitement, joy, that actually increases it, and it like solidifies that memory in the mind too. And don't we want our children to have more positive, happy moments? And so if they're having a good time, you're like, oh my goodness, you're having so much fun, you're so happy right now, then it's like, yes, I am. And it's just like, from an adult perspective, if your spouse comes home and they're like, oh my gosh, I totally nailed it today, and you're like, oh, you sound so excited, you sound so relieved that it went well, and then it's like you feel connected and you feel like somebody else is with me, either in the misery or in the happiness. So
Yeah.
it's all about learning to attach and bond and connect.
Yeah, and for kids, I feel like it also names emotions that we're trying to get them to learn to name within themselves. And especially, in active listening or reflective listening, I feel like we can use that all throughout life. Like if you notice that I'm happy and you're like, you're so happy, I'm like, yeah, I am. Like, but that's my love language, right? And so even if it's not your top love language, it feels good to have someone notice you and
Oh,
notice what you're feeling. But when we apply it to children, especially those younger kids, they're still learning regulation, emotional regulation. And so when we can do that with a kiddo that is having big feelings,
yeah,
then we're helping de-escalate the situation, but we're also helping them learn to self-regulate by recognizing, so that if you don't happen to recognize or catch it yourself, they can say, oh, I remember that the last time I did this, mommy told me that I was frustrated. That must
yeah,
be frustration. So mommy, I'm
yes.
frustrated. It all
And that's
ties together.
Yeah, and that's what happens. One of the most beautiful aspects of therapy, especially child-centered play therapy, or even with working with adults, is them gaining insight and gaining awareness, self-awareness, and learning to be aware of their emotions and where they're at. And so then, like, if they are frustrated, instead of them throwing something or screaming at you, they can say, I'm so mad right now.
Yeah.
And we all feel mad every day, and so, but learning how to handle it and respond to it versus trying to just stuff it under the rug, or just be happy, or just that toxic joy that's not realistic, just really accepting where they're at and just communicating it in an appropriate way without hurting someone, or being unkind.
Yeah.
So
And
it
I
helps
think
them to label it themselves.
yeah, and I think it's really important to also um, highlight that this is just one tool
Oh
in a
yeah.
bigger set, right? And so there are some parents that I know will hear this and be like, okay, but what am I supposed to do when my kid's like throwing stuff and
Yes,
breaking stuff, right? And
that.
so we remember that, like, if you're going to build a bookshelf, you're not just going to take one tool with you in, and you're not just applying one skill. Like,
Yeah.
you start with one, you have wood and you cut it and you measure and you cut and you do whatever, and then you get some nails and you start nailing and hammering, and then you paint, and like it's this
Lay a
whole thing. And
foundation.
so
Yeah.
exactly. So when we're talking about reflective listening skills, we're talking about one part of connecting with
Yes.
your child.
Yeah.
And so what is the like, and this is why when you work with parents, you're not working with them for 20 minutes. Like it's
Exactly.
ongoing, it's hours,
Yeah.
because we're teaching new strategies and ways of interacting with children, but also how to connect with a child that might be different than us or maybe has behavioral issues or whatever. And so how would we tie in? I know you can't summarize this huge thing into one small thing, but like generally speaking, if you're trying to do reflective listening with a child that's also having a behavioral, like I'm mad that I can't go to the park and I'm yelling about it, but I'm also throwing something. What do we do?
Yes. Yeah. And let me tell you, so in our 10-week course, the parents are asking that in the first session, right? And we're like, sorry, you're going to have to
Yep.
wait. Sorry, second session, you're going to have to wait. I think it's around like the sixth session that we
Yeah.
start giving them, okay, what to do with the non-compliance, right? Every child is non-compliant at times. And what do we do with that? Yes. So this isn't, but I have to say too, that if you will use the skill of reflective listening and accepting your child where they're at, you're going to most likely have less incidents of noncompliance, because what I found over and over again with my own kids and connecting with them, with my spouse, or the tension that will arise when we're not hanging out together as much and having date nights, or with the parents, when they start having these special playtime, they will notice sometimes on that same day, like if they have a special playtime on a Saturday morning, where they're applying these skills, and then like that afternoon, their child is like, "Oh, mom, you want to hang out?" Or, "Mom, hey, I made you this." It's like they are doing like naturally, such kind things to them. So we tend as parents, just give me the powerful stuff. Show me what to do to make all the behavior stop. But this is actually a tool that will help with the behavior. And actually, I didn't say this earlier, but with the child parent relationship therapy, what the research has indicated is that it lowers parental stress and lowers problematic behaviors in children. Okay. And so, yes, we do teach parents, how to appropriately set limits, and then how to respond to, like, when those limits are broken, how to respond to those. Just a quick little link, like if you want to put a link, in your notes section, our website, we do have a link to this 35-minute video that my father-in-law did like years ago. It's really dated, but it's still really good. It's a classic, and it does touch a little bit on, it's called Cookies, Choices, and Kids, or Choices, Cookies, and Kids, one or the other. And there's a link on our for free for
Yes,
you,
we
for
will
them to be
link
able to
that.
watch it. But so that does touch a little bit on using choices as consequences,
Yeah.
versus threats, and so that does help you feel a little bit more powerful as a parent. But again, the power that we have is kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
And so we tend to just like, I'm bigger than you, and you're going to do what I say, right? I'm going to
Hmm.
make you. But at some point, they get old enough to where you can't just move them, pick them up and move them,
Yeah.
or they get old enough to where they're teens and adults and they're doing their own thing. And so uh, you want to do what needs to be done to protect the relationship as well, while also setting appropriate boundaries.
Hmm. Which is why I think I really I value really being aware of mutual respect with a child. And I think that there are a lot of parents or people that scoff at that, like their kids. Okay, but they're still human. Right now, respect is not the same as equality. Like I absolutely should treat this child with respect because it's a child's
Yeah,
human, but I am still the authority and the parent.
yeah.
But I have to be mindful that I'm intentionally parenting in a way that is supporting, nurturing, and caring for this child without just me asserting my
It
authority over the
reminds me
child.
of what we've talked about, since we're both small business owners. And it's like, we want to create an environment where our employees want to be here, and but at the end of the day, like, we make the final decisions, right? And there might be times where we're like, hey, we're contemplating this, we'd love your input, but they know at the end of the day, we're going to make the final
Yes,
call,
ma'am.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can walk in that authority without, you will do what I say,
Right.
so.
Yeah. And I think it's just time and place. Like there are times where you absolutely, it's a no. And I've explained it to you and you don't like my answer, too freaking bad. Right.
Right,
But,
right.
but we, no one skill is used in a vacuum. Like we're constantly creative. Like one of the most important skills of parenting is the ability to be creative and
Absolutely.
knowing how to shift, how to pivot, how to grab this over here and use this here. And every child is different. So if you have 3 kids, well, you're probably doing it differently with every one of those children because they're unique individuals. But we
Yes.
cannot stop trying to intentionally parent each one of
Mhm.
these kids.
Definitely. And giving them appropriate alternatives. Okay, if they can't go to the playground, maybe you can brainstorm with them about what are some things that they might be able to do, or when can they go,
Mhm.
giving them some hope about what is possible versus always the no, no, no.
Yes, exactly. And so, okay, so I think I'm in our next episode, let's role play some more. Maybe you and I can come up with some specific topics to role play, but then I really want to link this also back to marriage because
Yes.
I do a lot of couples work and it's so amazing to me how we just don't a lot of people don't recognize that another adult has feelings that need to be validated,
That
right?
they're
I
not the
think
only one in the relationship. Yes.
right. And that it's so easy to get focused on what I need and why I'm not getting what I need or I'm unhappy and forgetting that this other person, even if they present as kind of closed off
Yeah.
emotionally, they still have emotional needs. And so reflecting, and it may not be obviously the same as like, oh, you're so frustrated because the adults can be like, why are you patronizing me? Right. But it looks, you adapt it and there is a way to
Yes.
adapt it to your spouse.
Definitely.
Exactly.
Definitely. Yeah. And somebody has to take the humble road, right? Somebody if there's a conflict and you both are seeing things two completely different ways, one of you has to say, okay, I can tell you're frustrated and I'm going to listen to what your perspective is. I'm going to value you and your perspective. Okay. What you're saying is blah, blah, blah. What you want from me is blah, blah, blah. This is what I'm hearing. This is what you're saying, and really like setting yourself aside, self-denial, and really focusing on the other person, and not always expecting, my husband, I think, is better at doing that than I am, but I can't always expect him to be the one to do it first, right? Because there are times where you have to set yourself aside. You're both agitated irritated with the other person, and you have to set your own wants and needs aside and think about the other person. What are they saying? And valuing their perspective and not just thinking, okay, you're being illogical, you're being an idiot, you just need to hear me. Right.
Yep, absolutely.
And
And
so
I
that
love
may just
that.
look like you're reflecting, like, okay, yeah, I can tell you're irritated with me. You don't like what's going on right now. Yes, I am irritated with you because you're blah, 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 and it gives just room for open discussion
Yeah.
and
And
mutual
creating,
respect.
yeah, and I think that, one of the hard things that you and I can talk about more next time too is when you have maybe years of doing it differently than this, which most people do. Like we maybe need to repair, right? And so for some people, they're like, well, I can't do that because I don't trust that they're just gonna throw it back in my face another time. Like I can say, hey, you're frustrated with me right now because of what I did. But then next week they might be like, remember when you frustrated me, blah, 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 right? And so part of it is, yeah, there's room to heal past stuff, but honestly, a lot of the times you just have to start from today.
Yes, exactly. And you have to come to terms with, I'm going to choose to grow and become the person I want to be, whether my spouse does or not. Right.
Right.
And there's this saying about, I'm going to choose to honor and respect other people, not because they're deserving of it, but because I'm a respectable person.
Yeah.
And so even in that moment, if they are treating me poorly or whatever, I'm still going to treat them in an honorable, respectable way by listening and whatnot, even if they're being a jerk or whatnot.
Right. And so to that point, it's intentionally behaving in a way that reflects who we want to be, right? So the way that I treat you is it has to also be not just because I think that that's what you want or need, it's because I want to know that I'm the kind of person that treats you well. I'm the kind of person that is not motivated by your mood. I'm motivated by my values and what I choose to stand, like how I want to be as a person, whether it's as a man, as a woman, like this is who I want to be. I don't want to be a jerk because you're being a jerk. I want to be kind regardless of whether you're being an asshole or not, right? So
And sometimes just coming, whether it's the parent, a parent of adult child, parent of a young child, or with a spouse, and just saying, hey, you know what? I've been thinking about this lately. I've been listening to this amazing podcast that Navart does. And, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I realize I have not, throughout our marriage or throughout parenting, I really haven't given you an opportunity to share your heart and to listen to you. And I'm going to work on changing that. And might sound kind of funny, because they will call you out on it, whether it's a spouse or a child, an older child. The little ones, you can start reflective listening, little bitties, and they don't care. They eat it up, right? But the other one, older ones are going to be like, what are you doing? Or why are you sounding like my counselor? Please bear with me. I'm just trying to learn a new way because I really want you to feel heard and understood. And I want to listen to you and I care.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That like summarizes everything that we just said. Like it's never too late to decide to be better at what you're doing. It's never too late to tell the other person, I want to do better. Like I'm going to make an effort. And if they
Yeah.
don't say, I'm going to make an effort too, that shouldn't discourage you. You are
Yeah.
responsible for yourself and you
Yeah.
have to be, at the end of the day, you live with yourself and your
Yes.
stuff. If something happened to your child or your significant other tomorrow, will you live in regret because you didn't do things differently? And that's why every day is an opportunity, as cheesy as it sounds, but like every day is an opportunity to just try to be better.
Yes, look, see, here's where my drink is landing right here.
Every
Every day
day.
is a second chance.
Ah, I love that. That's beautiful. Beautiful. All right, friend. Let's wrap us up. So tell us real quick your website, and I'll link to everything, but your website, and then
Sure.
for people who are interested specifically in the like
Child parent
10-week
relationship.
course. Yeah, child parent relationship therapy. Is that in person only? Can they do it virtually if they're in a different part of Texas? Can they do it if they're not in Texas? How does this work?
Yeah, so typically we only do it in person at this time. I have done it virtually, but it's just not quite as powerful. There's just something about being in person. Yeah, child parent relationship therapy. It is a 10-week course. We are about to start another round. And sometimes we do it in the evenings, or sometimes we have groups that meet during the daytime. So definitely give us a call if you're interested. And our website is restoringhope.dfw.com. And we have a lot of great resources on there. Like I said, that 35-minute video clip, and that we're offering that for free. And then just a whole bunch of other like parenting resources and just general resources regarding anxiety and other things. And then there's information about play therapy and about the child parent relationship therapy course and that sort of thing. So definitely check it out. And we hope that this has been a blessing for you guys, and that the resources on the website will be as well.
Yes, I'm gonna actually, I don't know that I've ever looked at your website, so I'm like, I have, but I'm gonna go back because I think that um, I like we were saying, there's always room to grow. I pride myself on being a good mom, but I want to continue to be a great mom, and I
Yeah.
want to always learn. And even though my kiddo is, he's 11 going on 12, it's never too late to learn skills. But even the ones that might apply to younger kids, it's the mindset shift for us to always be on the lookout for how to just be happier, healthier people so we can nurture happier, healthier relationships, right? So
Definitely.
I'm so excited to have this time with
Yeah.
you, friend, and I can't wait to do our next one. So thank you for your time, and then to be continued. I'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
Bye.